So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. So guys, Andre Ward has come out and given an interview with Fight Hype. I suggest you guys go and have a watch of it. Smash the like button before we get into it. Hit the, subscribe and hit the bell notification, share the videos and all that good stuff. I thank you all for your support, and let's get into it. So Andre Ward mentioned that this Canelo Alvarez fight, or this Canelo, basically he was talking about, his relationship with working with Caleb, and he said Caleb's just like my brother. And he goes, I'm very close with Caleb Plant. And he goes, I want to give Caleb Plant some, I want to help Caleb Plant and help him hopefully shock the world and become undisputed. He goes, I have no history with Canelo Alvarez. And he was talking about Crawford Porter. He goes, I'm not really going to get involved in that side from a strategical point with any guys, because both those guys are like my brothers. So I'm not really going to get involved because I don't really want to be taking sides. Because if he's close with both guys, if he goes and starts taking sides of one guy and giving tips from a strategical point of view, then you're spoiling your relationship with somebody that you're very close with, right? Because people are going to be like, hang on, what's going on here? So Ward's going to stay out of it. But he goes, here with Canelo, I don't really have any history with him. I don't really have a relationship with him. And I do with Caleb Plant. So I want to help Caleb Plant achieve his dreams. And I like that, because Ward's a fighter that we know that he helped Nonito Donaire earlier on in his career. I think he helped Nonito in some way. I think he put some money, was it, in his bag or something like that. Nonito was struggling with finances or something like that. I can't remember the full story, but I know Ward helps a lot of fighters, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. He's a guy that's very, very intelligent, and he's a guy that Caleb Plant could definitely use, to help him with strategy. And I think what Ward was basically trying to say, I don't have any history with Canelo. So like I have history I'm close with both Porter and Terence Crawford, right? I'm not going to talk with them from a strategical point of view with that fight, because I'm close to both camps, close with both guys. He goes, with Canelo, I don't really have any relationship. So the fact that he doesn't have any relationship, he feels that I can give Caleb Plant pointers, I can help him, I can help him look to achieve his dream, which again, I think, as I've explained earlier, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, he also, the reporter was saying that, people are calling you a Canelo hater and this, that, and I even questioned that. Is it something to do with the fact that Andre Ward was never a undisputed champion and he's trying to stop Canelo becoming an undisputed champion, because people may start questioning it? And people might start saying Canelo's one of the greatest super middleweights, and may even start saying he's a better super middleweight than Andre Ward. So is Andre Ward trying to help somebody that he knows that can beat Canelo Alvarez and stop him from being greater than himself? I don't know. I don't know. We can only speculate. We don't know what's inside somebody's heart. From what I've seen of Andre Ward, I don't really think he's that type of character. I don't really think he would care about that stuff, because he's had a great career himself. So I don't really think he'd care about what Canelo achieves, because I think he's pretty content with what he's done in his career. But then at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know. We know that Bernard Hopkins, for example, didn't want GGG to, I think, go past his defenses, and they were trying to get Canelo in there so Canelo can beat GGG, and I think he did, and I don't think GGG got the record title defenses of Bernard Hopkins. I think Canelo beat him. But what I'm trying to point out, sometimes fighters do envy other fighters. They don't want them to be better than them, or be viewed as better than them. So maybe Andre Ward was thinking like that, but I don't think so personally. I don't think Andre Ward comes across that type of guy, to be honest. But I think Andre Ward is basically saying, in terms of the history between him and Canelo, there isn't any. There's no history there. And he goes, when I was active, there was no talk of this fight. But when I'm trying to think, when Andre Ward was active, when did he fight Kovalev? That was about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, where was Canelo? 4 years ago, Canelo Alvarez, he must have been at middleweight, if I'm honest with you, or he must have been at, no, I don't think he was at junior. I think he was at middleweight fighting Golovkin, because I think he fought Khan in 2016. Then he fought Liam Smith, I believe, at the end of that year. Look, he fought Khan in May. He must have fought Liam Smith in September. Then after Liam Smith, I'm pretty sure he fought Golovkin, which was 2017. So he was fighting Golovkin at that point. And he fought Golovkin twice. I think he had an immediate rematch with Golovkin. You know, I think he got banned for 6 months. Then I think he fought Golovkin. I think that's how it is. So I think the reason why there was no talk about Andre Ward, because I think Andre Ward wasn't really in the conversation, because Canelo had you know, business to deal with Golovkin. So a fight with Andre Ward just didn't make sense. And I think when Andre Ward left, I think Canelo Alvarez, then I still think when Andre Ward left, I think, you know, Canelo was fighting Jacobs and stuff. So he still was at middleweight. It's only of late in 2000 he fought Rocky Fielding, and then I believe he fought Kovalev, I think. Or did he fight Kovalev? I can't remember the sequence now, but I think Ward was long gone by the time Canelo moved up or came up to 168. So when Andre Ward says there was no history, there wouldn't have been, because Canelo was in a different weight class. He also had business to handle with Golovkin, which at the time was what people wanted him to, or that's the guy that people wanted Canelo to fight. So if Andre Ward had stayed long enough, and which I believe he retired prematurely, I think Andre Ward could have had another couple of years easy. He probably could have been fighting now. I think a fight with him and Canelo Alvarez would have definitely been spoken about, and definitely it would have been a topic of discussion. It would have been a fight that people wanted to see. But Andre Ward left. I don't know whether that was because he saw what was coming. He saw that. I don't know. I don't think so. Because I think Andre Ward right when he said there was no history. There was no talk about me fighting Canelo. You know, it's not like I have history with him. It's only because, you know, Canelo fought Kovalev. And that's why this fight, you know, I can see the comparison and people started talking about it. But Andre Ward was saying there's no history between me and Canelo. There was nothing spoken about when I was active. Then is that a little dig to say that, why is this being spoken about now? Why wasn't it talked about when I was in my prime? You know, I just think that Canelo was busy dealing with, you know, things that the public wanted him to deal with. Like, public wanted him to fight Golovkin. And that's what, at the time, Andre Ward wouldn't have been on his mind. If Andre Ward had stayed long enough, I think the Canelo fight would have definitely been something people would wanted to see. But Andre Ward retired. So that fight able you know, went down the wayside. Otherwise, I definitely think that would have been a fight that could have been explored, especially the fact that, if Ward was still active and Canelo had gone up and beat Kovalev, then that fight would have been very, very possible. The only thing is, I don't think it could have happened at 168. It would have had to happen at 175, because I don't think Ward could have made 168, because Ward was a very big 168. So it would have had to be at 175. And Ward was not keen on fighting Canelo. Even when, at the time, when he was being asked if I would come back, he goes, I'd fight Anthony Joshua. And I said in a video yesterday that I think the reason why he would probably look for Anthony Joshua is because there's a good chance that Ward could lose both of those fights with Canelo and Anthony Joshua. But he in his mind, he's thinking as a fighter, and he's thinking, what fight would he get more credit for? By him going up there and becoming heavyweight champion against someone like AJ would be an unbelievable feat. And for his legacy, that would put him on another level. The problem is, I think he would be so undersized in that fight. And that fight could potentially be dangerous for him. The Canelo fight, although it's a dangerous fight, it's not like the guys, you know, he'd be bigger than Canelo. But he has a lot to lose. Because if he was to lose to Canelo, people aren't going to say, well, oh, he just fought a guy that was too big. There's a lot more to lose from a legacy standpoint if Canelo was to beat you. Whereas if Joshua was to beat you, people would just say, well, Joshua was too big. So I think Canelo would fight Ward in a heartbeat. Now or a couple years ago, it was Ward that just retired. If Ward had stayed put a little bit, he probably would have got that legacy fight that he probably craved and desired. Because I do think that Ward's career didn't have that defining fight, that legacy fight. Like, people think it could be Kovalev. I question that. I don't really look at that fight as a super fight. I think it was a good, solid win. But I think someone like Canelo would have been a super fight. A Golovkin even would have been a super fight. Because for me, Canelo, Golovkin, they were more proven than Kovalev. Kovalev was a big guy and he was a great fighter. But the fact of the matter is that Kovalev didn't really have many marquee wins. You know, the fact that one of his top 5 wins is against a 50-year-old in Bernard Hopkins, I think tells you all you need to know. You know, John Pascal, Nathan Cleverly, who else did really Kovalev beat that we look at and think, wow, you know, Kovalev beat some great fighters. He didn't, you know, the guy that everybody wanted to see him fight, Stevenson, that fight didn't happen. So although Kovalev was a good fighter, no doubt about it, his resume is quite weak. But that aside, I do think a Canelo Ward fight would have been massive. And I'm not sure Ward was interested, even if Ward was active. I think he would prefer to fight someone heavier because he probably thinks it adds to his legacy. Fighting someone like Canelo, who was smaller, and Ward would be expected, if it was in his prime, Ward would be expected to win that fight. So there's a lot more to lose because it's against a guy that people see as a 50-50 or you as a favorite. Whereas against Anthony Joshua, he'd be a massive underdog. And fighters always like to do that. Fighters always like to go and challenge themselves and be in fights where they're an underdog so they can prove and they become greater if they were to win that. So if Andre Ward was to beat Joshua, for example, you know, his legacy it'd be something else. By beating Canelo, although it would be great and he'd get a lot of money for fighting Canelo, from a legacy point of view, because he'd get a lot of money fighting Joshua. But from a legacy point of view, he looks at it, if I was to lose that fight, it damages my legacy. Whereas if I lose to Joshua, it doesn't damage my legacy, because it wouldn't make sense that you would pick Anthony Joshua. He was asked who would he rather face, Canelo or Joshua, and he said Joshua. That doesn't make sense to me. You know, why would you want to fight a guy that's so much bigger than you where you'd be undersized? Where it's against a guy that's, you know, a guy that you could beat that's a more competitive matchup, really. But I can understand why from a legacy, because it hurts him if he was to lose to Canelo. It hurts less if he loses to Joshua. So I can see why. To be honest with you, I don't think the fight's going to happen. From what, you know, it's not a fight that's possible. I know I said there's something brewing, and there is something brewing in the media, though, amongst the fans. There's something brewing. But there's nothing brewing in Andre Ward's mind. I think Andre Ward's clear that he's retired. He's not going to come back. And I think Canelo Alvarez, by beating Andre Ward now, wouldn't get any credit. And Andre Ward said that Canelo's not really calling out my name. Canelo's not that type of fighter to call out his name. He's never going to... I don't see him trying to call out Andre Ward. He's not that type of fighter. When you're a cash cow like Canelo Alvarez, you're not going to call anybody out. There's no need. And Andre Ward's retired. So unless he wants to come back and want to fight Canelo, which I don't really think... I think Andre Ward's a very smart guy. I don't really think... If Canelo was to call him out aggressively, would Ward come out? I don't know. I don't know. If Canelo was to come out after beating Plant and say, I want Andre Ward next, would Ward be interested? I don't know. You know, Canelo would have to do it for us to find out. What do you guys think? Canelo calls out Andre Ward, would Ward come out? Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys. And guys, remember to please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.